Dr. Jazz.
I mean, it was so nice seeing you in Maribor, like end of your tour, and hearing your new compositions and this trio with Anna and Michael. And I just wanted to ask you already then, like, but even now, like, I heard you in so many albums led by you. And what's your writing process? Because your themes are, I really like what you do. That there's like this composition and improvisational kind of blending. Sometimes you don't know where we are, and I love this. And how do you write? I mean,
Depending on the project, it ends up being different. I also it really depends on like how I'm trying to convey the ideas. So with that trio in particular, I had kind of this grand scheme of how I wanted the music to go before I even started playing with that particular trio,
oh,
and then I had a couple gigs booked for us. I think this is like 6 years ago, and I just couldn't. I was not in a place where could really write music for that band, and so we ended up just playing free improv for the
okay.
first couple gigs, and stuff that I had not thought would happen happened, and I was like, oh, I actually would like more free improvising with this band. And so our first tour that we did, I kind of had not I feel like I didn't have enough uh written music for a whole show, but we were able to figure out a way to like weave in and out of the composed music and improvised music, usually with some sort of musical cue. Like often it's me
Yeah.
doing something, but it can be like a melody or something like that that comes in and it tells people to go on to the next section. And that's always something that I'm interested in. I feel like um, it's a hard thing to do because it does require people to know the material well enough and like have be rehearsed or at least play it enough to kind of get to that point. And unfortunately, especially like in New York where everyone's so busy and like even finding one rehearsal for a gig is hard. That type of music making is hard to do. So I'm so happy I get to like do that with that trio, and sort of that ended up becoming kind of how I think about um, those pieces. But then it'll just be like I'm listening to a record and I'm like, I wish we had something sort of like this. And then I'll start writing it, and it'll kind of, as I'm writing, it'll get farther and farther away from that original thing that I inspired by. But I think that's also often is the case with some stuff where I think I'm ripping something off,
Yeah.
but then when it's
I know
done,
what you
I
mean.
listen to it and it sounds nothing like the thing I was ripping off. And then I feel like, oh, okay, cool. I must have done enough of me in it that it it doesn't sound like I'm ripping off Boulez or something, you know.
Yeah. No, I get you. I mean, when I have to write the ballad, I put on always Paul Motion. I don't know why. And it's like,
Oh
okay,
yeah,
and then leads me somewhere else. I always end up
yeah,
then in a odd meter vamp or something, which was not Paul, but still, it's like mm,
yeah. You
doesn't like.
can't escape your own tendencies.
Yeah, yeah. Where does I wanted to ask you about the odd meters also. Like,
Mhm.
you seem to use that really a lot and are really comfortable in it. Where does this come from?
Ooh, I actually don't think we have a lot
No,
of
it's
it
like,
in the music, at least how it's written out. I
oh,
end up, I
okay,
think, writing
okay.
kind of phrases. I think things typically are actually written in four,
Oh,
and
okay,
the phrases within it are odd length.
okay.
Um, and then just by virtue of how we're playing it, I think Michael will in that particular group tend to break things up. I often find that odd meter wise, I find myself a little limited compared to
Really
like
interesting.
Anna or Kate Gentile or someone
Yeah,
who's like really like working in a way where it's just so much it's part of understanding the musical language. Um, but I feel like just listening to stuff I mean, I've always listened to different kinds of music, and so it's one of those things that if you can hear it, you can do it. And so I think things creep in different ways. I feel like I often end up writing a lot more irregular phrase lengths than I do odd meters, and things end up feeling kind of lopsided that way. And that's certainly, I think I've been doing that more in the last couple of years, specifically because I was like on an insane only listening to Mingus for like 6-month period of just like, okay, this is some of the first music that I really loved. I need to just only listen to it and listen to literally everything there is and track down like weird live bands that were never recorded. And it's just like, oh yeah, he makes so many irregular phrase lengths seem so comfortable with how they're playing that music. And it just kind of, it sort of like cracked a window that I always kind of ended up feeling.
Interesting.
That like you should make things, square things off a little bit more. And so even if it doesn't sound like it, I'm definitely like thinking that. Even yesterday I was playing a tune, a newer tune of mine that's just very standard, and it's like a 32 bar AABA, but the last A is 8 bars, and I was like, it really doesn't make sense to be 8 bars. It really should just be 7. And everyone was agreeing. Everyone was like, oh yeah, that would actually make more sense with this phrase. I was like, okay. So no need to do it sometimes, you know.
Interesting. How did you choose like Anna and Michael? I remember we were joking, like you know, Mike Serene was basically on the touring circuit when you were one, I think, or something.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But the old man, like, but I mean, Anna kind of makes sense, you know, because she's a little bit older than you. But like, how did you, Michael?
I think with both of them, I played with both of them a little bit individually, and just thought that musically, again, my initial musical idea, I think the stuff we were just playing when you saw us is closer to what my initial idea was than whatever the first record, which I think is a lot more open, which is I really like. But yeah, they're just people that I admired, and I think there's something about the kind of musical diversity that both of them can cover. They can both do a huge range of things, and play in sort of different things, either be it grooving or not grooving, or this or the textural, and so I kind of I like the idea that the music can go in all sorts of these different directions. And even so, like on that tour you saw us, it was like our 3rd long tour. I mean, I guess maybe 4th, depending on we played like 10 shows in the States too that year. And so that was like the end of probably like 20 shows or so. And I still definitely am surprised at things that happen. I'm like, oh, cool. That even with the written material, like, oh, that's an interesting way to interpret that. And I think that that's part of why I like that. I tend to gravitate towards trios from like a practical angle, but also so many, because there's a practicality to, you can't bring a 17-piece band on the road easily, but or even 4 or 5. But I think there's so many records that I listen to, like that just the trio thing is so. I think there's something powerful when you have these. You can hear the voices clearer the less people there are, and I think it can be hard too because there's no one to mask you. But I think that that's actually part of why I like that, because everybody has a stronger voice in the music, I think, when you have less folks.
Yeah, no, it's also interesting with you. Like, I don't think you, on the records I have you, I don't think you have a harmonic instrument. On what I've heard you, like, not you're
most of the time I don't.
Mostly, yeah, using like horns only, and which I love.
I'm trying to think. I've done a couple recordings with Simon Nabokov playing piano. But those have been trio as well. And then Chris Davis plays on. I have this quartet record with her and Susan Alcorn playing pedal steel and Mike Pride. And I'm trying to think if there's. I think I'll have there's guitar on one record with Ross Martin plays guitar on something. But yeah, for the most part, most things are not. Yeah, it's like if I look through it, certainly more than half are just me and horn and drums.
Wow, it's a nice combo. I mean, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of the obviously Ornette's sort of such a luminary figure in that kind of chordless area. But I even think about like those Elvin Jones trio records with Joe Farrell and Jimmy Garrison. Like those are, when it comes to a more jazz thing, I think are such a milestone for just all. This is all you need to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned Jimmy Garrison. I mean, and Ornette and Mingus. Were these guys like? I mean, what was the reason you started to play improvised music or jazz? Let's say, were these guys the reason kind of that you heard that and like was like, shit, I want to do that, or was there a moment?
So the first improvising I think I ever did was more because of King Crimson, like the '70s King Crimson. Like I was playing electric bass in high school and played a lot of like prog rock and was really into. And so the first free improvising I probably heard was on some of that live, like John Wetton era '70s King Crimson. But I didn't think of it like as free improvising. I probably thought of it as like, oh yeah, they're jamming, man. And then, but then I got into school. I went to the new school and I got in on electric bass. But at the time I got in, I was mostly listening to jazz and bluegrass, both of which the acoustic bass is kind of like the thing. And so I kind of switched as soon as I got to school, to the dismay of my first teacher there, who really tried to talk me out of it, and also just talked me out of playing in general. That was a really bummer. But I'm stubbornly still doing it 16 years later.
Very
but
amazing,
yes, but yeah. So I was listening to stuff, and I think I sort of went backward historically. I mean, I feel like very few people start at Louis Armstrong and move forward these days. Yep. Like that's usually, but like, so I think the first jazz I heard was probably like the Headhunters or like, you know, Return to Forever. And then I sought out the other projects that like maybe Chick Corea did. But I feel like free jazz was sort of the thing that grabbed me the most at first. Like I think it took me longer to get into like, you know, I liked Meditations by John Coltrane before I liked A Love Supreme or like the quartet, like the other quartet stuff, or you know, and so I don't know how it is the first. Maybe it was one of the most important records. I think was The Call, the Henry Grimes Trio ESP record.
Yeah.
Because Perry Robinson is on that, and I've known Perry since I was a little kid, because I grew up in Hoboken, New Jersey, and he was just kind of this figure around Hoboken who he would go around and do magic tricks when I was like 5. I remember him like this old man doing magic tricks for me and stuff like that. And so when I was like getting into some stuff, my dad, who is also a musician, he is a really great musician, but also just a really great like listener of music. Like he loves so much different stuff. So I also had the privilege of growing up in a household that was, you know, he'd be listening to Fela and Zappa and Dexter Gordon and like just, it was always different stuff, or Stravinsky. And so when it came time, when I was like getting into some jazz stuff, he was the first person to be like, oh, you should check this record out, or oh, you should check this record out. But I think that Henry Grimes record was one of the first ones that I really responded to, and then ended up getting into like 60s free jazz was like the first thing, and like 70s. Like there was a point like when I was first starting in bass where I was listening to all these Pharoah Sanders records, and I even started like carrying those bells in my bass case. You know how there's just bells in the background of all those late 60s, early 70s Pharoah records, and I was just like, well, music has to have bells going on at some point. So like, and then from then I kind of started going backwards and got more into metric music, but also like looking forward into like, you know, the European improvisers of the 70s. But yeah, so free jazz ended up sort of being like the first jazz I liked. And so, yeah, all those folks are, you know, Ornette certainly is a big part of that. And then Henry Grimes was my teacher for many years. And
how did you end up with him?
I went to go see him I think for my 19th birthday, because I was a fan, and it was a few years after he had reemerged, and I think my dad saw in the paper, like, hey, Henry Grimes is playing at the Vision Festival, which I didn't know anything about the Vision Festival. I was like a year into playing the upright bass and didn't really know much, and so I went to go see him, and after the set, I like went up and said, hey, do you teach lessons? And Margaret, his wife, like jumped in. Yes, he does teach he lessons. And here's a business card. I think maybe he had just said hi. Maybe that's the only words I got to hear him say that night. But then I started going over his place regularly, maybe every 2 weeks or so. And it was just like, we would just improvise for hours, and he would cut in and give suggestions or be like, hey, follow me for this thing. But most of the time it was often just playing. But after a year of having a teacher at college who pretty much was trying to dissuade me from playing and was saying things like, well, you know, if you can't play this bebop head in all 12 keys now, then you're just not even going to be, it's not even worth playing.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, that's, yeah, great energy. And then Henry, on the other hand, would just treat me like I was an equal when we would be playing. Like, we'd be playing a dialogue for 2.5 hours, and it really was like something that was one of the first people that like treated me like I was worth it, you know. And that went on and off for about 5 years. It kind of changed from lessons to just me like helping them out with stuff. Like, I transcribed all his compositions from the 60s so that they had copies of them, and would like let them borrow my bass or do stuff like that. And in exchange, we just would play, and it was really nice.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, because
I was a lot more
olive oil.
What's it called? Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just a lot more fearless as a young person, just to ask anyone anything, just to go up and be like, hey, I'm a fan of yours. You want to do this thing sometime? I feel like now I'm like, oh, I don't want to. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've built then this really beautiful relationship, which what's the story behind Olive Oil, the record you put out last year with Henry also, and because there you can hear this. I mean, both of you sound immensely powerful, and this huge bass sound, and like, what's the story behind that one?
Well, we played. He did a residency at the Stone in, I think, 2010 in November, and asked me to be one of the performers on it. And so we played a duo for that show, and I recorded it. And it, you know, it was something that I just kind of had archivally. And when he passed away in 2020, I, you know, was having a lot of, you know, I hadn't seen him a lot because, you know, Margaret had kind of kept a lot of people out of his life towards the end and didn't want people talking to, she maintained a lot of control over his like home life. And so I didn't get to see him very much before he passed. And so I was, you know, it was hard to, you know, having not seen him and not been able to help in those last years. But I went back and listened to that recording like shortly after, and I thought it was really funny because to me, I can hear how much I'm trying to be him on it. Like, I'm like 20 years old, and I'm just like, it's kind of like there's 1.5 Henrys playing, the way I just described it when I was talking. I was like, it's like, it just sounds like I'm just like on him the whole time. But I think it works in a way where it's just kind of like this mass of sound that is just constantly happening. And so I was like thinking maybe I should put this out, and I had a few friends listen to it, and they were like, no, this is nice. You should do this. So I eventually was just like, well, like, it was more for people to hear him than me. I don't think it's my I mean, I'm 20 years old. It's not my favorite playing of mine, but I feel like his later period, while documented, I still think isn't as understood as his playing in the 60s. I feel like I saw him so many times playing, and he did so much stuff, and I feel like he gets into certain areas, or he might not be in a great situation or for that particular concert, but man, he really had this really long playing, super patient way of doing things that I I don't think I've cracked it yet either, but I appreciate it even more now than ever, and so I really liked when listening to that, so I wanted to put it out.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, yeah, like you said, just obviously people then who know Henry then stumble upon you as well, which is beautiful for you as well. But like you said, to hear him play, he's, I think, one of the underrated greats of bass music.
Oh yeah.
Like musicians know him obviously, but then you go wider and it's like, okay. So beautiful.
Yeah, I was listening to that Steve Lacy record School Days recently, and I was like thinking, like, when it comes to like swinging 60s bass, I was like, I don't think there's a better record that captures everything that like I love about bass playing. Just the way he plays bass on that record is it's just nuts.
Yeah.
I just listen. I'm like listening to it and like laughing and shouting along with it at home. I'm like, oh my god, Really, it keeps bringing me joy.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Like you mentioned you were 20 when this happened. Like, how was it for you when you were 20 and we're talking about 2010 and entering the New York scene and who were the first connections you kind of made with players? I mean, how was it?
I'm from New York originally, and then grew up in Hoboken, which is
New Jersey.
which is New Jersey, but literally the closest place in New Jersey you could possibly be to the city. So like, at least I felt at home in town, which was nice. And I had that young person fearlessness, which really is a good trait, because I just went up to anyone. Okay. And so I volunteered at the Stone from I think 2008 to 11. Oh, and so I'd work the door at the Stone, and so I got to meet a lot of people just playing, and just in my young man confidence could be like, hey, we should get together and play sometime. And so many musicians say that, as just like a half-hearted hi, but there's so many people that are
actually
actually willing to play, but also so many great older musicians that are also just so supportive of young people. And so like so early on, I think some of the earliest people I played with, I think Perry Robinson was one that helped a lot. And so I started playing with Perry again. And then that led me to play with Lou Grassi. Mm-hmm. And Lou Grassi then introduced me to like Will Connell. And Will Connell then hired me for his... What do you say?
And Mark Whitecage also through Lou?
Yes, for sure. Okay. Yeah. And Steve Swell. Mm. And then... I kind of got involved with some Vision Festival folks, and William Parker invited me to play for like this bass choir thing in 2010. And people are nice. I mean, like, for the most part, if it's a great musician, they're usually supportive. I would say more often than not, the people that I like went to go see or looked up to were at least willing to like play a session or come hear you play or something and be really supportive. And it was really nice. Yeah, there were so many folks that, I mean, I got to play with so many of my heroes at a way too early. Like I got to play with Braxton, I think in 2010 or 11, like as part of an orchestra thing. Oh, okay. And it just came down, it was like a 60 or 70 person thing. But like, I just remember like, it was like my birthday or something. It was like, I was just like, oh my God, it's like my, I think to this day that's like, he's carved into Mount Rushmore in my mind. And so, that was like a Taylor Hobynum who I got to know, just like was like, hey, invited me, like knew I was really passionate about it. And so got me involved with that. I think it's one of those things that when people see a young person that is working hard and trying to be a part of the scene, I think even if they're not the greatest, if they have good intentions and they're busting their ass, I think there's something to be said for trying to like incorporate them. And I think a lot of great musicians that's always been like a trope in jazz, but other music as well. I mean, bluegrass is similar too, like of having an older band leader and a younger band just to sort of like train the next generation of folks. But also like it keeps the band leader playing new shit all the time. I think someone who does that as a modern thing is like Tim Byrne. Like
Yeah, for instance.
every 10 years, he has a new band, and often newer or younger people, and it makes him play different, but he makes them play different, and it's just like a whole new thing grows out of the ground, and it's like such a beautiful thing about this music that helps it kind of keep. It's kind of like when a tree drops seeds so that the next trees can grow, sort of.
Yeah. No, I wanted to ask you. I mean, we kind of came here naturally, but yeah, that I noticed that you really played with the elders a lot. You know, especially connecting like all these guys you mentioned. So it's
when I was really young, I think one of the things that I wish I did was play more with people my own age, because at the time I sought out every opportunity to play with anyone older that I could, which I think is great, and it's really is the thing that taught me how to play more than practicing, more than anything else. Is just like kind of the being thrown to the wolves and surviving on a gig, and sometimes it doesn't go well and that person never talks to you again, and sometimes it goes well and you level up or something. But I really think that like I really avoided playing with people my own age, because I was like, no, I want to play with people completely better than me all the time. I didn't want to play with my own peers while I was in school, and I didn't realize how important of a thing that is. I'm also have, as friendly as I may seem, I do have some antisocial tendencies. So I think it's something that has to do with it as well, and something I'm kind of consciously always trying to fix now. And I think it's something that like people should always be playing with people above and below and just exactly next to them and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I got to play with so many people, and it's something that it's like sometimes I forget when I'm looking at a calendar for a particular month where I have no gigs, and I just like go back and think, I was like, yeah, well, I got to like play with Muhal Richard Abrams. It's like,
what?
That was like, yeah, it's just something like,
okay.
That was still one still hasn't sunk in. It's like, there's still plenty of my heroes I never got to play with, but I mean, how lucky, it's and it is luck in a way,
Yeah.
No one does things. It's not just who works harder than the next person, as much as I tell myself that to when I can't book a tour or something, I'm like, you just need to work harder. It's like, well, sometimes it's just time and place.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how many thousands of emails you send.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that I truly cherish, and like, even if I never played another note, it's something that like I did get to do that at least once with plenty of people I like looked up to, and that made me,
Yeah. I mean,
I got to remember that more. Thank you.
yeah, that's the best school, right? To learn,
Yeah.
like just to be on a 10-day tour. I remember I did a tour with Tim Byrne and Tom Rainey, like 2008.
Yeah.
And man, they kicked my ass all the time. And for me, that was like finishing 3 universities, BAs, bachelors, whatever, because it was just like, shit, man, I should work on that and that, and I have to listen more, and that's the way to learn. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's something. Yeah, and that also, both of them are so good.
Oh, yeah, obviously, yeah, it's a different one. But the first record I heard you on was your quartet on Not Two Records. That one.
Oh
with
my gosh.
Swell and Tyshawn, I think it is. And you were what, 22 or even younger? When did you start leading bands?
I think we recorded it and I was 21, but it was. I think I was just about to. I think it's May 2011 that we recorded it, if I remember, with my weird Rain Man brain, and then it came out
12, right?
in 2012. But yeah, I was 21 on that one. That was definitely like, I haven't listened to that in a while, but I think it's some fun. Some fun stuff happens.
That's a good.
Oh, thank you.
Especially with Tyshawn. I mean, how did you hook up with him? Like, what's your story with him?
Well, we're both from New Jersey, and the first place I actually ever heard him was just playing like a local gig, just like a local bar gig. I actually remember my dad had heard him maybe a week or two before, and was like, came home to tell me about this gig because he would play with some of the same people, and was like, Yeah, there was a guy playing drums that was so much better than everyone else on the gig. Like he was like, it was incredible just watching him play with all these terrible musicians. It was just like the drummer was incredible and everyone else was no good. and and I got to like, and then I was like, I finally heard him. I was like, oh my god. And then I think that then but that was just with like a local like blues band or something like some which was amazing. Also, it sounded like if '70s Tony Williams was backing up
Yeah.
like a bunch of like doctors and lawyers playing blues. It's very funny. But it was incredible. And then I think the first time I saw him play improvised music was the trio with Roswell Rudd and Faye Victor
Wow.
at the Stone. And I was like, oh man. And so I knew him just like around and knew him from the Stone too. It's because he was playing. It was when he lived in New York. He was playing there all the time.
Yeah.
And I saw him with Henry a number of times actually, which was always that was a very cool rhythm section. And also Henry and Chad Taylor on the Mark Rebo stuff was so cool to hear a bunch of times too. But yeah, so I knew Tyshawn from that, and so I was sort of like, yeah, I didn't know. It was more just like who could I ask to do this? Who would be a cool band? And so I asked him, even though we had not played. He was the only person I had not played with yet when we made that record.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of, it was one of those ones where we had one rehearsal, played a gig that night, and then recorded it the next day, and then played one other gig as a CD release. And I think that's the existence of that band.
Oh wow, that's
But
a
it was
shame.
like,
A killing group.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I had a lot of like anxiety around doing things because when you're really young and you've never really like toured or played with somebody, because like I did a Kickstarter for that record. I remember I was just like, I want to make a record, and then it doesn't take that much if you don't go to an expensive studio and you do a lot yourself, and
Yep.
and so but yeah, it's one of those things that's like there's not really a school for band leading or booking as much as schools of music probably should teach some of that stuff. There's some of it that you don't.
It should be
There's
like
I just
every year, man.
even
Yeah.
one class. I don't remember anything telling me like about like email etiquette, or just like, hey, this is how you keep a band together or something. But yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of projects that I did that were very short lived because I just was also like playing with people older than me and above me, and I'm just was nervous or like
Sure.
felt like I just I didn't have confidence asking them to do more stuff, or I don't know. It's a I think the mental side of it, as someone that has dealt with like different levels of debilitating mental issues through their life, I think sometimes just like what your brain allows you to do is really like your limit. And I feel like the limit changes from day to day, but sometimes it's like I can barely like read an email because I just can't like I just don't have cognitive function. And other days I can send 7,000 emails. I'm like an Energizer bunny. It's a very weird, but I feel like people can talk themselves into and out of a lot of really good ideas when you're making musical decisions or even like organizing decisions and stuff like that. There's even musicians to this day that I'm friendly with and that I know, and like when we see each other, it's cool, but I don't think I've played with because I'm somehow still intimidated by them. And maybe it's just the way they carry themselves.
Sure.
But yeah, it's always, yeah. But like when I was 20, I would just be like, I would go up to John Zorn and be like, give me a gig at the Stone, man. And he'd be like, fuck off, kid. But like, it was like, like it was a different kind of energy. And then I gotta get a little bit more of that confidence back. That little that unfounded confidence.
Interesting. You said, because when I saw you here, like you seem very comfortable when band leading now. I mean, with Anna and Michael at least. Like, how was it in the beginning for you when you called those guys up, and like, was it heavy for you to lead a band? I mean, like you already kind of said it, but like still.
At least at that point, I'd done some stuff, but I was also, it's one of those things that on the first tour that we did, it was my first tour leading a band.
When was
like
that?
I'd booked tours. It was just before the pandemic. It was like 2020.
Oh, really?
And I've toured with people. I booked tours as like my friend Jacob Jolliffe, who's a mandolin player. Me and him have gone on a couple duo tours that I booked myself.
Oh, really?
But again, that's like the two of us, and not necessarily. It's not my project. It's like us together. I just booked them, but the tour that me and Anna and Michael did in February 2020 into March of 2020, which is crazy.
Yes.
We made it like a week before the pandemic. But that one was the first one that I booked all of and then led, and it was like my name on the thing. And I think some of it comes from the fact that both of them have toured much more than me and are nice people that can communicate with me. If there's something, like, they can talk to me and I ask them their opinion on things, or like, having at least enough of a friendship where you can ask people like, hey, what should we do here? Or would this be a good idea? Or what do you do in this situation? Or if something doesn't, or even if I don't ask, but just being comfortable enough to be like, hey, next time, can we do this? And then you just, the answer is either yes or no at that point. Like, and so I think having real communication and good communication between band members is something that people need. And in general, something I think the community needs, because so much stuff is based on everybody not wanting to upset one another, so that you can get called for that next gig. And I think that it creates this weird communication style. I see it a lot around town, of just people just kind of like everyone weirdly kissing each other's ass in a strange way, where you're like, you actually were just telling me you don't like that person's music, and then you just went up to them and you're like, oh my God, that record
crazy.
was amazing. It's like, it's just so, I'd rather just avoid conversations with people at all. It's kind of how I end up doing it, which I don't think is healthy either. But I think
it's honest.
I do think I think at least talking to people and letting them know if there's something wrong, or if there's something you would like, or if there's something that they could do better, or you could do better. I think that that's an important thing, to be able to talk to people, even your peers, or even people older than you or younger than you or whatever. Just like have an open conversation about it, and not be confrontational, but just be like, hey, I need more money to do this, or hey, I need more notice to do this, or if you're going to send music, you can't send it the night before, or stuff like that. People should be able to have those conversations without it being weird. But it's so often people make them weird so often.
Yeah, we're bizarre creatures.
I'd rather just be weird naturally.
But you mentioned the first tour. How was that like for you? Being on the road as a band leader, and was it hard? Playing every night and presenting the band and all that. And
that one was it was fairly easy. It wasn't like it was super long. I think it was 8 shows or something, with 1 day off or something. But it was nice, and the shows worked out. And I don't know, the last show, we were supposed to play in Italy the last night, but that got canceled because of the pandemic. And we were supposed to record in Italy as well, so we had to postpone that. That's why the record came out after. But yeah, I don't know. Even in general, I feel like it just sort of happens. Like I've toured with a lot of people. Like I've played as a bass player, and I've done like some long tours, like month long. And it's one of those things that I think learning from what you like and what you don't like as a side person, and just trying to carry that over and just be like, okay, I like when it's just, you just do this, and then you could just do that, and then you can ask people's opinions on other stuff. But so far, none of them have been particularly crazy. I haven't had to do one of those tours where you're flying every night.
No, that's crazy. Yeah.
In a while, I did one of those with James Brandon Lewis maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I forget who booked it, but that was one where it was like a 4 a.m. lobby call every day.
Saudade does those always.
Yes, they probably did it, but I had just gotten over a pneumonia and was still in recovery, And so just like I just remember having like this much energy on that tour, and James is so like
Yeah,
powerful
yeah.
and just ass kicking, and I just like it was one of those ones where I'd be like laying flat right up until showtime, then I would just put everything into the bass and then just lay flat again right afterwards. And then that was like how I had to get through that. I remember we had a lot of fun, but it was that was a difficult one. It was being sick and then having 4 a.m. lobby calls was like crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's my pal, and that was nice to get to do with him. But the yeah, I feel like so just touring with other people teaches you kind of about who you like. If you've toured with a really bad band leader, there's nothing that teaches you more than that, because you just take note of all the things you hate, and then you're like, okay, don't do that.
That's a cool one, actually. You should be like a professor, like telling all the students, find a really bad band leader, and then you
Yeah,
learn
I
the
mean,
most, But
you
it's
gotta
true. It's true, actually.
start somewhere, and
It's true.
so
Yeah.
it just, it's funny because I was talking, I think, to Michael about this on tour, and I was telling him some stories I've had with certain people I toured with, and he was just like, "Oh my God, you toured with some some rough folks." He's like, I guess I'm just lucky to not have had like anyone that crazy on the road or something like that. I was like, yeah, I guess it is really a roll of the dice there, because some of us, but
Yeah, it can get rough on the road. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, definitely. Yeah, amazing. Otherwise, Max, what's on the schedule? What 2 questions? Like, when is this new record with Anna and Michael coming out, and what's still on the schedule for you for the upcoming months and weeks? And do you have some records or
Yeah,
tours?
I launched this label in 2022 called Unbroken Sounds, and so I'm putting out some of my own records on it. I put out a record by Simon Nabatov last year with his sextet, and a record by this alto player David Marachi last year. And I'm trying to put out more cool stuff. So I'm on the lookout.
How come you decided to go that path for a own label?
Because I'm sick in the head, and I can't. I don't have enough. It's like I'm always so busy with stuff and always so stressful. I'm like, oh, you know what I need to do is more work. But honestly, I think of it more from like a community sort of aspect of just like, it's hard. Labels aren't doing much. So many of them just don't exist anymore, and the ones that do exist are kind of like, some people are like just charging artists like a ton of money to put and it's like, well, just make it yourself. And so I started it ostensibly just by putting out a couple of my own records so that I could learn how to put out my own records. And now that I do, I'm like, oh, okay, I know how to do this. I can do this reasonably inexpensively. Let's help other people do that who may not know how to do it themselves or want to do it themselves. It's more, so it's kind of like I'm like collaboratively putting people's records out ostensibly. And so I have a couple of mine coming out. There's one with a duo with Sam Newsom.
Really? Oh, beautiful, man.
That's going to come out in March, and that's something me and Sam have been doing for the last couple of years. And the record is really cool. Like my friend Jason Borisov engineered it in like stereo, so that any of the movement stuff that's happening, if Sam is moving the horn, like it's all captured on the recording, and it has a really full. It's recorded really well, but also the music's cool. And then the record I did with the new record with Anna and Michael, I believe is going to come out this summer.
Yeah.
And then I have another record with Nate Woolley and Brian Chase that we recorded last year.
Okay.
I'd like to put out as well, but it will. I just don't know when yet. And then 2 records just came out this month that I happen to be on. One is with Russ Johnson and Tim Daisy.
Oh, man.
And it came out on. It was recorded at Live at the Hungry Brain 5 or 6 years ago, and it's called Live at the Hungry Brain. And then there's a record with Alfred Vogel and Sana Nagano and Eddie Paz that Alfred just put out on his label called Chattering Teeth. and that's cool. I think that band will do something. I have no idea. There's a lot of me waiting around. I'm in the middle of getting a PhD right now. I know I mentioned that I'm a sick person and can't help but do more work all the time. So
What's
that's in composition.
Wow, beautiful. Okay.
And so I've been doing writing a lot of chamber music stuff for that, and just in general, because that is another side of my life outside of improvised music.
Amazing. And
so I have a few pieces I need to finish, and a couple of premieres this year that I'm excited for. But fantastic. Yeah, it's a lot of I'm just trying to do stuff I like and try to not do stuff I don't like. And if each year we could get the percentage a little bigger and a little smaller, that's really what I'm trying to do.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, since you're not so busy, you should start a big band, I think, and put it on the road.
I would love a big band. Are you kidding? That's one of the things I've never gotten to do and would truly love to do. That would be amazing.
With you.
At least once.
Yeah.
Someone has to pay for it.
That's a different story.
I think any of these I have a couple of big, large idea projects, and it's just like, I don't have any money, so who's gonna make it happen? Maybe it could be you, not you, Samo, but exactly. Someone out there on YouTube.
You should have that 20-year-old.
Just put a nice help.
Yeah,
put a number at the bottom.
Sign. I need like $30,000 to record and improvise.
I could do it for a lot less. Okay. We'll talk numbers. YouTube watcher.
That's amazing. What about tours? Are you
Should I start selling ad space?
Yeah, that's exactly.
I'm hoping to in May.
Okay.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
There will be a number of gigs that will need to be booked if that's going to still work out, and it's looking grim, but I'm hoping it does.
Yeah. No. But super. I hope to catch you next time again in Europe, and
Yeah, I'll let you know if I'm in that section of the world.
Yeah, kind of central. What am I? Something central. I don't know.
Yeah.
But man, Max, thanks for taking the time today that we got to do it. And
nice to see you in the internet, and nice to see you in person in Slovenia.
Yeah, and I'll send you a link when this is out and everything, then we can share it. So
all right, great.
I think so.
Have a great 2024.
Yeah, you too. Cool.
Thank you.